Going to go ahead and get started. A couple more people will probably trickle in as we begin, but thank you all for joining us on a Friday afternoon for this presentation about a day in the life of a learning specialist. Today's format is fairly informal, so if at any point during the talk you do have a question, feel free to either unmute your microphone and ask and we'll respond in the moment, or you can also put it in the chat and we will either address it at the time or at the end of the presentation as well. So as we begin today, we are going to share with you all kind of how each of the panelists on today's presentation got to where we are, what our professional journeys are. But before we do that, some introductions are in order. So my name is Kelley Catenacci, and I am the Director of Learning Services at the University of Florida.
Hey everyone, my name is Brittney Cable, and I'm a learning specialist at the University of Mississippi.
Hey everyone, Carli Faulkner, Manager of Student Learning at LSU.
Hello everyone, I am Ashley Kuhn and I am an advisor at Florida Gulf Coast University.
All right, Brittney, do you want to kick us off?
Of course. So like I said, I'm Brittney, a learning specialist, but I didn't start there. My undergrad is in recreation parks and tourism management. I was an intern in life skills on the athletic side, so in the same department, but just, you know, the third tier of it. And I got a graduate assistantship, and that's when I transferred into this academic role as a mini learning specialist graduate assistant. I received my master's in sports recreation administration, and I was lucky enough to have a full-time position open at the University of Mississippi when I graduated, and where I did my graduate assistantship. So I kind of just switched over into full-time, which was really nice right when I graduated. And I've been full-time for almost 4 years now. I would have to say that transitioning from the graduate assistant to full-time, I know you guys might have heard this earlier in the day, it was easy because I had, you know, like every little idea of what the department needed and wanted, but at the same time, I was now full-time. So if someone would be like, oh, well, Brittney will just do it because she is the GA, I had to remind them that I was a full-time staff member now and that I will gladly train the next graduate assistant to do it, and, you know, kind of teach some other people in the meantime. A mentor once told me that it's okay to say no. So that was very helpful in, you know, my journey to where I am.
So I'll be 100% transparent with you all this afternoon. I think it's important to mention though, for the longest time, I did not know that a learning specialist existed, not until I applied for a position as an assistant learning specialist. But I think, you know, I took a leap of faith and it worked out. But that speaks a lot to how much the profession has grown, even just in the last 5 years, 10 years. It's becoming a more predominant profession and field that people are interested in and training for. So I kind of came to this position, like I said, from an untraditional way. I did my master's in sport and exercise psychology. And initially my goal was to work in like the nonprofit sector and to work in positive youth development or something like life skills through sport for young athletes. Until I, like I said, discovered this opportunity and took a chance on the University of Florida, and it ended up working out. And once I learned about the role, I realized it is the perfect combination of the things that I was kind of skilled and trained in, but also passionate about, being personal development as well as athletics. So at the time that I started my assistant learning specialist role, it was part-time. It was a temporary position, 20 hours a week. And I need everyone to know I moved across the country for that. I left Wisconsin and I moved to Florida for that part-time role. And I think, again, that's important to mention because you have to take risks sometimes, especially in this field. And again, I think there are a lot of things that could have gone wrong, but I had a great support team around me. And then I also kind of just held fast and was able to kind of make a career, I suppose, out of what am I interested in. So even though as that assistant learning specialist, I was given a caseload of students when I was working part-time. And then even though it wasn't built into the job description, I was always going to my supervisors asking for extra opportunities. I wanted to learn more. I was having extra meetings with everybody and really immersing myself in the learning services program, not only to demonstrate my work ethic to my supervisors, but also, again, just for myself, because I think I really visualized this as a career path. So after about 9 months of being in my assistant learning specialist position, I was in the right place, right time, and was able to move into a full-time role. And I took over my own administrative piece of our program, which was the psychoeducational testing program and academic screening. That was an incredible lesson, and I encourage everyone to at least kind of observe or speak to somebody who's in charge of that, or get as much experience with the psychoeducational testing as you can, because I think you're going to see that across institutions, even though institutions structure learning services very differently. And then just recently, about 1.5 years ago, I moved into the director of learning services role. So we're going to talk about this throughout the day today, but there is more hierarchy in learning services than there ever used to be. And so I get to oversee full-time staff in addition to part-time staff. But I'll leave you with this for my professional journey. As I'm kind of reflecting on how I got to where I am today, I think the biggest piece is that your work ethic needs to match your desired outcomes, right? And so I would just encourage you all to have that mindset. And work-life balance is not really a thing in a lot of careers these days, but especially in athletics, it's more like work-life blend. You have to figure out, it may not be a 50-50 split. I can actually tell you it's not going to be a 50-50 split, but just making sure that you're involved in things that are purposeful and that you're passionate about and that are going to kind of fulfill you professionally and personally. And one more thing I'll mention is that I'm a huge Brené Brown fan, and she always talks about how we're all obsessed with things that are comfortable and easy, but I would encourage you to do things that are uncomfortable, because if you're comfortable, then you're not learning. So just keep that in mind as well as you are already in your full-time positions or pursuing full-time positions as well.
Perfect. Thanks, Kelley. I'll go again into my professional journey. So I'm the manager of student learning at LSU. I actually was a Division III student athlete. So I played softball at the University of Texas at Tyler. And then I came back home, which is Louisiana, and I decided to get my master's. My undergrad was in psychology. I was really thinking at the time that I was going to do sports psychology. I'm big on counseling, but that was one additional year of school that I just couldn't do. So I did a master's degree in sport management instead. When I got here, I found the Cox building. I ended up being a strategy tutor. Some places call it like an academic mentor. So I did that first semester, and that's where I made connections and was able to be a graduate assistant. For the tutorial program, I tutored kinesiology classes. After that, I was able to as well become a learning specialist. A position opened, which was awesome for me. And I ended up going that route and being a learning specialist. I was a learning specialist for 2 years. Then I got promoted to manager of student learning, which I've been for about 4 years now. So all together at LSU and in this building, it's probably been a little over 7 years that I've worked here and loved it. A lot of the panelists have already said, really wanted to talk about our journey and how they're different. So I did have some similarities with Brittney, obviously being a graduate assistant and full-time, and Kelley, because I also manage full-time staff members as well. The biggest thing that I kind of wanted to bring home, that my journey has kind of shifted in a sense. I started out in this field in a young age. Some of you probably are very young as well. At one point, I was the youngest in the building. I wish I could say that, but I am not anymore. I'm more like middle of the pack, starting to like get up there in age. But as soon as I got into the field, I was married. So I got recently married, and then 3 years into the field, I had my first son. And when I worked there, there was no women at the time around me that had little kids. We did have 1 or 2 young ladies that had older kids, but no young, kids for me to really look at to know how am I going to do this? Kelley kind of mentioned work-life balance is a good phrase to say, but it's more of just how can you survive and also have a life outside. And it's kind of the choices you decide to make in order for it to be worth it. So when I was pregnant and as I was having my son, I wanted to try to set the best example I could for those around me. Anyone that saw me, to let them know that you can have a family, you can have other things outside of here and be able to still do this job and make sure that you're working towards whatever you want to be. Currently now I'm pregnant with my second son, and I want that same thing. I have 3 learning specialists that I supervise, and I want them to know if that's an aspiration that they have. I want them to know, and hopefully they can look at me and say, she can do it. So hopefully I can do it as well. And something that kind of my supervisor had told me is changing your mindset on being more efficient and effective. So using the time you have during the day to get those things done. A boss isn't going to look and see that if you're in the building every day until 7, that's a great thing. It might be, maybe you're not being efficient with your time and you have to stay extra in order to get things done. So it's not always if you're always staying late or always here on the weekends. It's really about, are you efficiently and effectively completing that work? And for me, that was something I had to realize as someone that wanted to continue my career. And just for those that are potentially young in the building and you want to, take that opportunity to do those additional things, the 2 things I can tell you, whether you want to have a family or whether you've just started and you want to continue to grow, is you do need to set yourself some boundaries, whatever those boundaries are. I did not do that great for my first 2 years at setting boundaries. Students would call me at 10 o'clock at night, on the weekends, early in the morning. I mean, you name it, they called and I answered. And just if you don't answer, that doesn't mean that doesn't make you a good learning specialist. It makes that you have boundaries. So now I have a boundary of 9 o'clock at night. Don't call me after unless it's emergency. Every once in a while I'll answer. But for you all, I would set whatever boundaries you want. So whatever that might be, maybe no doing, any kind of work at the dinner table, something very small, but give yourself something instead of letting work just totally consume you. And the second thing is surround yourself with people that appreciate that. Surround yourself with people that support you in those things. So it might not be, whether or not you want a family doesn't matter, but surround yourself with people that are going to support you during those trying times. Because like we talked about, it is crazy. You'll learn in a minute, not every day is the same. And so making sure you have people that fully support you in those things is very important. And, you have priorities outside of your work. You want your work to be great, but you also want to make sure that you don't burn out. And I think that's the biggest thing that people don't want to talk about, is that is a lot of things that can happen because you just want to continuously give. But if you are not giving to yourself, then you're not going to be able to sufficiently give for other people. So my 2 takeaways just from that, as you're thinking about this field or you're in this field now or been in this field for a while, I've been in it for a while, and those are 2 things I do all the time and I struggle with, which is just setting those boundaries and making sure you have that support system with you.
Carli, yes, I love another working mom in athletics. Great. I am too. I could talk about that for days, but I'm going to go on a little bit of a different path so you guys don't hear similar stories. But so my journey into athletics has some similarities and some differences. I was a broke graduate student and was looking for to make a little bit of extra money. And my graduate program is criminology. I have a PhD in criminology, if that shows you like, what is this lady doing here? They needed a statistics tutor at the University of Florida for student athletes, specifically in their learning disability section. So UF has this really cool learning disability statistics section that they offer students who have registered disability. And so they needed a tutor for that section. And I was like, shoot, I can do statistics. Let me help and make some extra money. Jumped in, absolutely loved it. Was like, why am I getting this PhD? This is no fun. Tutoring student athletes is the best ever. Thankfully, a spot opened up in an advising internship in the Hawkins Center. And I jumped into that while I was finishing my PhD. And then eventually a assistant learning specialist position opened and I moved into that direction. And then a learning specialist position opened, which was great. Worked there for a little bit. And then my family and I had a kind of pivot point where my husband is an attorney and had an opportunity to go to where we grew up in Naples to be near family at a great firm. And so we kind of had to make a plan of what we were going to do, where I was going to go, move to a place where there was really only one university in the area. And so we moved, and I wanted to emphasize the point of networking because we moved to this place that was new. There's one university in the area, Florida Gulf Coast University, which was like 45 minutes away from where we lived. But I was super intentional at N4A. I don't know if any of you guys are involved in that organization for the year before, because I had an idea that we might be moving to that area, to network with the advisors that were in that area, so that if we did actually move to the Naples, Fort Myers, Southwest Florida area, I at least knew the people. So if something came up. So my thing I wanted to talk to you guys about or emphasize was the importance of networking and being super intentional, but also authentic in your networking, so that if you have a pivot in your life and you move somewhere, or your partner, whoever you're with, has to move somewhere and you totally have to change paths in some direction, you did a good enough job to set yourself up so that you can find some place to go. So luckily, after 6 to 8 weeks, I can't remember, but it felt like 2 years of being home with my kids. I love my kids, but being at home with my kids is not the best plan for me. A spot opened up at FGCU in their athletic advising unit, and they called me and asked me to apply. And I've been here now for 3.5 years and have now pivoted to another position on campus. But my point is, make sure that you are networking, and N4A is a great organization to do that with.
All right, now we are going to start with Brittney, and we're going to share with you all kind of what our day-to-day kind of tasks and responsibilities look like.
All right, so I wanted to just walk you through my day. It usually starts at 8 o'clock. I'm in my chair answering emails. This semester, luckily, I don't have a student at 8 o'clock. 8 o'clocks are rough for everybody. But answering emails from tutors, kind of rescheduling or canceling sessions, and then meeting with my students one-on-one. So our meetings are typically 2 to 5 times a week. It just depends on the student. We work on study skills, time management, organization, all of that while doing assignments, studying for tests, preparing for projects. The sessions are consistent week to week. I answer phone calls and they'll text me if they have any questions about an assignment, but it's usually, that hour we're sitting down daily to get work done. I have a late night every other week. Right now it's on Zoom, and that is drop-in hours. We have a counselor that's in the building, and then the learning specialists take turns to be on Zoom, and any student can drop in just for a little extra help. So our individual sessions usually start off with, at the beginning of the week, reviewing their objectives and creating a task list. I just recently found out that you could share notes on your iPhone. Like, I feel like I'm not that old and I just figured that out. So the counselor, myself, and the student are all on the same note. And it's been really easy to just have them check off what they do. They can update it when they're sitting in class. So it's been really nice to transfer over to that. And so we'll start at the beginning of the week with creating that list and kind of doing like a daily task list. And then in each of our sessions every day, we'll review that list, mark anything off that they've completed, add anything, update it. And then we'll start with an assignment or whatever they have to get done first. Whether that is they have a paper at the end of the week and they need to create an outline and get that started, or if they have a discussion board that's due that day. We like to do active study skills. So creating an outline, even if it's not part of the assignment, but creating an outline to help them, break down the assignment and guide them towards the final product. Study guides, note cards, flashcards for quizzes and exams. It's not always their favorite to do, but at least I know they're leaving my office with some knowledge of something that they did that day. And along with meeting students, I have 9 on my caseload. So Mondays I meet with 9 students. Carving out time for lunch is not really a thing that I do because it's not in my day on Mondays. But again, going back to boundaries and Carli, if you want to take a lunch, make sure that you carve that out and you have that, on your calendar. I'm taking a lunch at 12 o'clock and I will be back. Leave your desk so people can't come find you. So along with my caseload, I work as an assistant tutorial coordinator. So I do scheduling, that's day-to-day trainings. We'll do orientation and then tutor trainings once a month. So we're creating and implementing those. Again, right now they're on Zoom, but they would be online or in person. Communication is key. Have meetings with my supervisor, my boss, my director, the counselors of the students that are on my caseload. And then I have other administrative duties, such as tutor evaluation. So right now I'm sitting in on Zoom sessions to evaluate the tutors. I work with timesheets and payroll to make sure, all our tutors are getting paid and double checking their hours. Tutor spotlight, we get to choose a tutor every month. So there's just, a couple other things that are on my day-to-day that, are on top of my caseload. So my students always come first. It's important to prioritize and multitask. So my students come first. That doesn't mean that, especially right now with Zoom being our platform for tutoring sessions, that a student can't get in their Zoom session or a tutor is having technical troubles. So they're texting us right at the beginning of the hour when we're trying to get our students started on work. Answering that text, but then making sure your student is focused and getting their work done. It's not easy, but it's just something that comes with the job. And my phone is not on silent all day and it's dinging all day long, but just to see that text message and saying, oh, well, that can wait, but this can't. So then, going back and forth from the student and computer and phone. But that is all I have. We work over the summer with the summer bridge program. So summer looks a little different than the semester, but we still have students all year long. Summer is mostly getting them, acclimated to college life and transitioning them from high school or a junior college into the full 4-year university.
I think Brittney did a great job of kind of demonstrating how the learning specialist role is not solely working with students all day. It's a big part of a lot of our days, but there's so much else that goes into it kind of behind the scenes. So very similar to Brittney, I spend probably about 70% of my day working with students on my caseload. I also have 9 students that I'm working with. And so I'm managing that along with a lot of my other kind of supervision stuff simultaneously. So I appreciate the visual that Brittney gave because it's very real. You've got all your phones, lined up in one, and you've also got your Zoom and all your screens, and you're just trying to pay attention to what's most pressing at the moment and what's most valuable for you to be paying attention to. Like Brittney, I also supervise our part-time strategy tutors. And so that's a lot of my day. And then evening, we have a lot of evening sessions as well. So I make sure to have my phone with me so that I can respond to their questions, because I need to help them troubleshoot if they have technology issues, or if the student is running late, or if they're not sure what a certain assignment or task is, or if they need the materials. I really want to be there for our part-time staff, because I need them to feel supported so that they can support the student athletes. So I very much treat that role, supervising our tutors, as like a customer service type situation. And sometimes I'll get a question from a tutor and I'll be like, oh, they should know that, or I'll get frustrated. But then when I actually do respond to them, I'll make sure to be very professional about it and say, no problem, let's get it fixed. Because again, many of them have other jobs. This is not their primary job. They are working with our student athletes and doing a great service for us. So we want them to feel as supported as possible, so that they can have that positive rapport with their students. The other thing that does take a lot of my time is supervising the full-time learning specialist that I had mentioned previously. And so my supervision of them is both formal and informal. Informally, all day we are talking, and I am fielding questions from them and providing feedback for them on, again, all the platforms. So texting and emailing and phone calls, and even like a Microsoft Teams chat that we always have going. And they might be asking for feedback about, hey, I'm going to send this email to a tutor. What do you think? Or I'd really like to update this part of the handbook. Can you help me out with it? Or I need vacation time. So lots of things like that that are going on throughout the day. And I really want to be there for the full-time staff on that regard. And then I also have more kind of a formal supervision with them as well. So bi-weekly with the 3 learning specialists, I'll have one-on-one meetings with them. We do have staff meetings once a week with just our learning services program with everyone, and those are fantastic. We talk about current events and we go over what's important in the program. But I also think it's really, really impactful to have those one-on-one meetings with the learning specialists. So they feel heard, they feel seen individually as people, as opposed to always just a unit or a group. And so in those meetings, I let the staff kind of guide them with what they want to talk about. And sometimes they'll tell me about a goal that they have. And so then we'll come up with a plan for how they can accomplish that long term. Sometimes they'll tell me something they're frustrated about, and I'll just be an empathetic listener to them. And then if they want a solution, or if it's required that we do come up with kind of like an action plan, again, we'll do that together. And so again, it's just a really important time for me to support the staff that I'm working with, so that they can feel kind of like encouraged and equipped to do their jobs the best as they can. So this is another kind of thing that I take from Brené Brown. She talks about how courageous leaders listen to their employees' fears and also their emotions. So that's important to me. I would also say that my leadership style personally is centered around my 2 core values, one of which is inclusion. And so I try to make sure my staff are given as many opportunities to learn and grow as possible, but I also challenge them to make sure that those opportunities are meaningful and they're adding value. They're not just another kind of notch on their belt, because again, we already know that this job is very demanding and time consuming, kind of beyond traditional hours. And so I think that's some guidance that I can play with my staff to make sure that they are pursuing the things that they're really passionate about and that light their fire. And then my second core value is optimism. And again, sometimes my staff are like, oh, like, we just want to be frustrated for a second. Let us be frustrated. And I absolutely let them feel their emotions at the time and to sit in whatever feelings that they have. But then I'm going to be the one who says like, okay, this sucks. I hate that the football team changed the schedule. It's really challenging. But we have to do it. We have to adapt all the tutoring appointments, and here's how we're going to get it done. And I'm going to help you, or here's how we're going to break it down. So I'm very much kind of like that problem solver, and kind of turn challenges into opportunities wherever possible, while also kind of acknowledging the emotion and stuff that does come with challenging situations. The kind of last thing I'll leave you all with is, since I do supervise full-time staff, and I know some of you are looking to get in this field if you're not already in it, if I were hiring a learning specialist, something I would really look for on a resume, I would want to see it come through in a cover letter, is that they are a team player. Whether your learning services program that you're trying to get into is one person or 10 people, you are going to be working on a team regardless within your academic unit and with the students as well. And so I'd like to see that these applicants are people who are willing to contribute to the program as a whole. I feel like there's a lot of times a mindset in our field, in corporate America, and our country, that it's all individual, like I need to progress, I need to do X, Y, and Z, and I need to be promoted. But I think that that can live in harmony with ensuring that your program is advancing as well. Whatever program that you're a part of is constantly kind of growing and evolving and evaluating itself. So I think if you do that, then your peers and your coworkers are going to notice, and then they're going to speak your name even when you're not in the room. They'll be able to kind of put you up for other opportunities, or kind of say what you've accomplished and all of those things. So I think that's really the goal, is be a person that other people will talk about positively, even when you're not in the room.
Perfect. Thank you. So I'll give just a brief overview of just a couple of things that might be a little bit different with my day-to-day, but I think Brittney and Kelley had a lot of similar things, so I won't repeat. I do start my workday at around 7:30, 7:45 in the morning. We have a football study hall in the morning. We call it Breakfast Club. There is no breakfast for anyone, but that's what we call it. And then I work every week on Thursday nights. So I work on a Thursday night, so I have half a days on Fridays off. Like right now, I'm currently off. I'm kidding, I'm at work. But I use those days to catch up on the nights that I have to work here in the building. And I just make sure, with another full-time employee, we just make sure that the building is running smoothly, appointments are running smoothly. So I'm in our tutorial cube, just making sure that if tutors have issues, especially right now in Zoom, somebody is here to just make sure that we're doing okay. I have a caseload of 10 students as well, so very similar. And I work with students from about 7:30 in the morning till about 12:30. Some days I'll work till 1:30, but most of our sports, unfortunately, start practice in the afternoons. So we don't work with students there. What we do have is meetings. So we have bi-weekly meetings with our entire staff, and that's of about 20. And then we also have bi-weekly meetings with just our learning specialists. So it's called our educational support services. So it's my director, it's me, it's the 3 learning specialists, it's our tutorial coordinator and her manager. And so we all kind of get into a room and we discuss some things that are going on every other week. When that isn't happening, when I'm meeting with students or in between sessions, I am helping take out any small fires that can occur, not literal fires, but issues with students maybe not being in class, not being where they're supposed to be. I might start a fire because a student is not in class or on Zoom. So I might be calling an advisor or someone, a coach, just to wonder where they are. So that is happening all throughout the time. So Brittney kind of talked about, tutors having to call them. And so a lot of the time, some of our advisors I'm calling. So if they get a phone call from me, they definitely know something is up. And so the biggest thing with working with supervising 3 full-time learning specialists, working with a caseload of students and dealing with what we deal with, is that, Ashley kind of talked about pivoting. This is another opportunity where you just have to pivot. Every day is not going to be the same. And that's why I love this job, is that you're not going to have the same day. You're not going to have the same conversations. A lot of things that you're going to be doing different. Some days you're going to come in and have a task list of things that you're going to get done. And after 8:30 in the morning, that list has now completely changed. So it's just being able, again, to just pivot, figure out what is important. So I keep a list kind of running. People that know me, I have a bunch of sticky notes around my office on what I need to get done. It's not the most organized method, but I know my madness. So I write those things down in order to make sure I can't do this today anymore because this now takes precedent. So as you're thinking about just doing this job, just know that some things you set out to do on a specific day, you might not be able to get done during that day. The other thing about this field is it's very people and person oriented. That's the one thing I love about this field is it's all about building relationships. My husband works in a medical field where his supervisor has not ever seen him work because he works in surgery. So he or she has no idea what he does. But kind of like Kelley was saying, it's a blessing that you get to meet with someone one-on-one. You get to have their opinions and thoughts. I also meet with my staff biweekly, but that way you can grow as an individual and you can kind of guide how you're going to go or where you're going to go. So if you start off in a position as a learning specialist and those aren't happening, reach out to your supervisor and ask to meet biweekly, or reach out to the director of the program, because those are opportunities that I did not realize other jobs do not do. So sometimes you've got to be the leader in that and say, hey, you know, if you're not going to have a rock star person that's going to do that, then you got to be that rock star person, because that's just going to trickle on when you become a director or a manager or whatever. You can do that for your staff as well. A couple other things that that I'm in charge of is our ROAR program. It's a reading program for our students. It's rediscovering opportunities and advancements in reading. So when we have some students that come in, Brittney talked about developing these skills. Some students come in with lower skills and really need assistance when it comes to reading, because it's not just reading words, it's understanding, it's comprehension. A lot of times in our science-based courses, that's very difficult because a lot of those words already are large. And if you don't have the skills to be able to break down those words to even figure out a part of what that word means, you're going to struggle. So our ROAR program really looks at the science-based courses, and we figure out how can we break down this material in order for a student to be able to understand it. So I specifically work on this with another manager in our building, Brad Jones, and we do this together. And then Kelley kind of talked about earlier how the learning specialist position is evolving. So if you're really looking into this, a lot of the learning specialists underneath me work on these other responsibilities that we have. So strategy tutor program, we have our summer program, we have study hall. Those are all things that each learning specialist is in charge of. Testing was talked about as well. So they all have a part that they're in charge of, and then I help supervise that. So what's really good is you start running your own program, you start being able to make additions, you start being able to look at it and see what can you do better. So when you're given that opportunity as a learning specialist to take on something like that you find a value or something that you love, take it on and make sure that you add something to it, your spin on it, or something to help the program out. Don't ever feel like if there's something there and we've been doing it for 5 years, that does not mean we have to continue to do it that way. That's something that people are always looking out for, is just how can you be innovative and create something to make it your own and to make it something you're interested in. I specifically, for the ROAR program, I am very interested in helping students, especially in reading. I am big on helping no matter what student kind of evolve and get better. And the ROAR was something I wanted at the time. Someone else had that program. So I went to my supervisor and said, hey, I'm really interested in that. Can I be a part of it? We talked about valuing things in order to do things that make sense and not just a checkbox. So this is something that I was able to get a year later because my supervisor knew that I liked it. So also be able to be upfront with your supervisor, be able to be upfront on things that you like, because this is only going to help you. So ROAR is, like I said, a big part of it, but then also the responsibilities that fall underneath managing people is very important, because if they're doing a kick butt job, which all my learning specialists are, that makes your job a lot easier. You know, when they're doing great, you're doing great as well. And then the last thing, you know, Kelley talked about what's something that she looks for. And so when I'm looking specifically for someone, I definitely agree with her, team player, 100%. In this job, you have to be. I kind of gave it's more than one word, but I kind of talked about how you need this kind of Swiss Army knife mentality. If you know what a Swiss Army knife is, we have all these different tools. Now, if you quiz me, I have literally no idea what they are, but I know there's a bunch of them. And the point of it is that you need to have all these tricks, all these skills ready to go. We talked about pivoting. We talked about issues that come up. When you work with a student, you might work with doing it this one way, they don't understand it, pivot. You got to find something else. You got to find something else. Sometimes you might be working on something, someone comes in and needs your help, and you've got to be able to use whatever other tool you have to make it work. So a lot of times it's just knowing that no day is the same, that you might have to use different skill sets every time you meet. Some of those skill sets, if we're talking literal skill sets, would be patience. We've talked about that before, or teamwork, or being empathetic, or being a teacher, or sometimes having to be a parent or a mom in a situation. So having all these tools ready to go and knowing when you need to use them. So if you're ever interviewing, or if you're ever, you know, looking for another position or higher up, that's something you want to be able to let people know, is that you can, you know, like Ashley said, pivot, but you have different skill sets ready to go when they're needed.
Okay, so I'm going to come at it from a little bit of a different perspective, because the other three presenters today come from some really large schools with some big budgets. And I came from one of those schools and was so spoiled, because when I came to my new school, I was like, what do you mean you don't have a testing program? What do you mean there's no learning specialist? So at FGCU, we're a small mid-major school. We have 3 advisors, and one of those is a director, so she has a much smaller caseload. My caseload is about 140 students. At Florida, when I was a learning specialist, I had about 20. So that at first kind of blew my mind. But I love that Carli brought up the Swiss Army knife mentality. And I think I gained that in being a learning specialist prior to this, was I was able to kind of just figure it out, you know, like working with 140, working with 20, you have the skill set there to apply the same kind of ideas. Maybe you don't build as strong as a relationship as you would with 20 students with 140, right? But you have all the skills there to make it work. So coming from a mid-major, working in a hybrid role, we don't have a learning specialist. So there are obviously students there that are lacking the skills sometimes when they come to college and need that extra assistance. I was so grateful for my experience being a learning specialist, because I could sit down and knew how to help them learn skills that they needed to at least get by if there was a student that was struggling. And I also knew that there were resources on campus that could help us too. So wanted to talk about the collaborating with campus partners. So when you're at a small school and you don't have a ROAR program or a testing program or a summer, you know, bridge type program, it's really important that you lean in on your campus partners, because they are absolutely willing to help you. A lot of them have the programming and are dying for people to use it. And so when you can funnel your athletes to them, it creates a great partnership. And it also shows off like some of the great students that you have. So relying on campus is really big when you work at a smaller type school. I also oversaw our tutor and mentor program. One thing that was a little bit different for me coming from a bigger school was that the type of tutors and mentors that we could recruit were really just undergraduate students. Where at Florida, we had mostly graduate students and teachers that were working in the field. And sometimes the teachers, well, not sometimes, almost all the time, I felt like the teachers were better at working with the students or had a better skill set than I did. So coming to a smaller school, working with undergraduate students, that was a totally different perspective for me. And I had to spend a lot of time training, making sure that they felt comfortable working with other students, they were professional, and just that they had like the basic skills and felt comfortable with working with other students that were their peers. So another kind of different aspect. But again, I love that Carli brought up that point of the skill set. I really feel like anybody getting in a college athletic educational type environment should be a learning specialist first, because I think that gives you like the bare bones of working with students. And if you go into the world of advising, or if you stay in as being a learning specialist, I just think you know that basic foundational element of working with students, and you know how to build a relationship when things might be really hard for students, which I think is really like all that they want.
Thanks, everybody. All right. Well, we just have a couple more minutes. We definitely want to leave some time at the end for questions, but we did want to touch on, I feel like we all spoke about a day in our life, and some of us mentioned how that's different in COVID times, but we did want to highlight it, and chat a little bit about what are the things that we've had to pivot or learn about or change as in our learning specialist roles with the pandemic that's been happening and having to do things virtually. So we're just going to speak to a couple of things really quickly, and then we'll open it up to some questions.
So for me, it was about flexibility, right? So all of our sessions took place in the building. There was no communication between the student and the tutor outside of here, and there still is not, but we have a little bit of extra leeway with Zoom. So we were able to keep some of our tutors that would have graduated, and we wouldn't have been able to keep them on a lot of our sciences, which are sometimes hard to find. So we have one in Maryland right now, and she works 10 hours a week for us, which is fantastic. So we have that light. And then also when students are traveling for competition, we will just cancel their sessions. And some of them have the time and want the tutors while they're on the road. So Zoom has allowed us to keep or reschedule, just change an hour or two, so that they can still get that help that they need while they're on the road. All of our Zoom sessions are recorded. So we have that, compliance piece there, to help us a little bit, feel better about the Zoom sessions. But yeah, I just wanted to touch on the flexibility.
Carli, do you want to touch on work-life balance?
Yes, so I kind of talked about it, so I'll make it really short, but the good things we got from this is that normally, because we can do Zoom, we had a lot of people where if you had a doctor's appointment and by the time you did the appointment and came home, you could get on Zoom for an hour or two and meet, or, if you had a sick, sibling, or if you had a sick child, you could also Zoom from home, which is really nice. The only bad thing about it is that your work and your home life are in the same building. So sometimes it was hard because it was easy for me to call someone at night. Hey, can you check on this spreadsheet for me? And totally forget that it's 7 o'clock at night and they shouldn't be working. So it was being able to make sure that we kept whatever work we were supposed to do, even though it might have been at our house, there, and give us some more time and more freedom outside. But I think this does show us that I think from here on out, if there are issues, that we can Zoom from home, which makes it much easier during difficult times when we might not be able to make it to the office.
I just wanted to bring up the point of mental health. This is obviously something that's incredibly important to think about and to talk about. But I think the pandemic really exacerbated the situation, and the number of student athletes, especially who have mental health concerns, has really skyrocketed in the last year. And so as learning specialists, oftentimes we are the closest relationship that a student athlete has on campus. So we may be either observing things that we're worried about, or they may disclose that to us. So, at Florida in our program, mental health has always been a priority for us to pay attention to, but we have redoubled our efforts since the pandemic has begun, and made sure that we are fully educated and equipped to support and refer student athletes to resources. So we have been meeting with our mental health counselors that we have on staff regularly, just to make sure that we knew what the referral process was. Since we're in the virtual environment, how can we still make sure that can happen? What's the crisis procedure? Like if there's a mental health crisis and we're on Zoom, what do we do? How do we adapt the hierarchy and kind of the flow chart that we already had in place? And then we are kind of just brainstorming about things that we haven't seen before that we're going to start seeing because of the pandemic, right? So that we can keep an eye out for those as well, making sure our tutors are equipped as well and know that if they are feeling uneasy about a student athlete's demeanor or have a mental health concern, how they can then refer as well. So mental health is always an important component of our programs. But again, I think that COVID has just shown us how much more we need to educate ourselves and maintain that education as well, so we can make sure that the student athletes are fully supported.
And I think that ties nice into the relationship building and how important that is in our role. And that can be harder when you're talking to somebody through a screen. And it's really easy to just kind of like go right through all your Zoom appointments and not take that time that you normally would if you saw someone in person. And so I think it's when we first did this and I did study halls with my groups, I tried to find fun ways to, have them each do something different. So like one week, our softball team would have like their pets and they would like introduce their pets in the screen. So then it kind of made us feel a little bit more connected, had you get to know a little bit about them. Sometimes they would like wear their favorite Disney character or whatever. I had little themes for each of them. My family is also really big fans of Chick-fil-A, and in the kids' meals, they have packed these cards that would ask questions, and I would use those in my session. So each time I would meet with a student individually one-on-one, I would use one of those questions. And so one of the questions would be like, where's your favorite vacation spot? And like, that would be the question of the day. So I would use those little Chick-fil-A kids meals questions to just get to know my students. So try and find ways to like intentionally get to know the students outside of just the normal academic questions.
All right, so at this time, if anyone doesn't have any questions, I'm going to go ahead and advance to the contact screen because I don't want us to miss that out. So I'll keep that up. But at the same time, if anyone has any questions, you feel free to unmute. We're a small group and you can ask, or you can also type it in the chat if you would prefer. And then of course, all of our contact information is on the screen.
Hi guys, thanks for doing this on a Friday afternoon. I'm actually a teacher right now and my students just left Friday afternoon before spring break. So thanks for doing this. I guess my question is I kind of got dropped into learning specialist, didn't know much about it, and I'll be an intern this upcoming year. And I just want to, you guys mentioned kind of teaching. How do you see that transition over from a teacher to a learning specialist? Like what skills? I don't remember who mentioned it, but someone said that they see teachers do really well, like one-on-one. And so I guess I'm just trying to make that connection between the two different professions.
Well, I can say from jumping from life skills to learning specialist or, graduate assistantship on the academic side, I didn't know I was doing that until like a week before I got to my graduate assistantship. And I freaked out. I cried because I was like, I don't have any experience in this, but just from being in school and going through school yourself, you do have so many skills. And as a teacher, I mean, it's just, I'm not sure what grade you work with or what age group, but no matter what, all of those skills transfer over. I mean, like, I think it was Ashley who said that she felt the teachers were more qualified than she was. And I feel the same way. You guys have these little like workshop and sheets and all these little like tricks that even though they might seem childish, they still work for college students.
And I think relationship building just cannot be undersold enough in this role. If you know how to build relationships with students, then you can figure out the rest of the stuff.
Thanks for that question, Ryan. Jessica in the chat asked, how do you plan on readjusting to an in-person environment after the pandemic? Do you still plan to utilize virtual services for tutoring or learning specialist appointments? Does anybody want to speak to that?
I can. We're actually having a lot of conversation on that right now. We will be going back to in-person, fingers crossed, in the fall. Personally, from learning specialist perspective, I'm meeting with my at-risk students in person, mask, 6 feet. But we see that as a detriment for our specific students that they are Zoom. A lot of our at-risk students, we make come to the building and they still Zoom with their tutor, but they're here. That probably won't go anywhere. We are looking at potentially keeping some virtual sessions for what we talked about earlier, which is we have some tutors that we know that have left, but it gives them an opportunity, or if they live far away and they're trying to do the, transportation back and forth, that might help them. So we might have more tutors. So that's one thing. Two, we do also, I think Brittney had said it, we record our sessions. So we like that for a lot of reasons. One of our core values is integrity. We can keep track of what's going on in sessions. And then two, we just have that housed for us. So we're probably going to figure out a way to do that. We have no idea what that looks like, but we're going to find a way to record even in person and have that so we can look back if we need to for our tutors or students.
Thanks for the question, Jessica. Does anyone have anything else? Thank you again all for your time today. Feel free to reach out to any of us individually if you do have additional questions. And then I think Delaney has just a QR code that she would like you to participate in a survey, a feedback survey. So let her throw that up there.
Carli, can you grant me access really quick?
Never. Okay, I did.
There we go. Awesome.
Can you guys see the QR code? So if you wouldn't mind doing the evaluation for this, and also you can hop on over to our closing ceremony. Thank you all for your time. We appreciate you guys.